started pretty well straight away. So let me move this banner that's on the screen. So Suzy, thank you very much. Welcome today. Muriel, thank you very much for volunteering as normal to take part. And the point we've got for a topic we've got today for discussion is how do business events evolve in a post-COVID world? And that's something that Suzy, with all your years of experience, knows a lot about. We'll be introducing Suzy in a few minutes. And in terms of what's the plan for today, in terms of what's sort of next, as it were, it would be very good if you could just indicate in the chat what you're really passionate about and why you do it, and be bold with your questions. As I say, we'd love to have those questions coming through. We would just ask you not to put web links in there, just simply because it's about respecting the fact this is about sharing value rather than self-promotion, as it were. But at the end of the day, we'd like to have a very diverse group of people join us on the live streams, and I'm sure we'll make a lot out of it today. Now, those of you who are a little bit less familiar with this, in addition to actually wanting to work with our clients and wanting to make a difference, fundamentally, we love helping clients to bring their sales forward, amplify their brand, and get their time back. And as part of what we do, we show you the how and also the methodologies and systems so you can achieve great results. And in terms of a little bit of an introduction from myself and Muriel, I founded Business Growth Bureau just under 7 years ago. I'm a great believer in the importance of circular relationships where everyone's sort of winning. And there's a lot of talk about a win-win, which is normally comes from a big company dealing with a small one. And we all invariably know that's code for win-lose, okay? The view I tend to take is we can all make everyone feel good about the relationships with each other. So whether your interaction is with prospects, clients, suppliers, investors, associates, staff, team members, and advocates, if you can try and think of how you can make everyone feel good about the relationship, the nice thing is people actually want to work and interact with you. And this is one of the reasons we do these live streams. It's because of what happened in March last year as a consequence of COVID. We thought it was an opportunity to actually give things back. Muriel, do you want to give a little bit of a brief introduction into yourself?
Yeah, very much so. I love building relationships with people. Hence, I love working with our clients. We've got some absolutely lovely clients and followers, really, that we've developed close relationships with. So I just try to make the process as easy as possible and work with them to sort out any issues or problems.
Lovely. No, thank you very much for that, Muriel. I'm going to introduce you in just a moment or so, if that's okay. But just picking up on a few comments that people have very kindly shared. Renato, as we know, has got a very good role within one of the largest telecommunications companies in the world. We won't mention by name, but he's looking over time to transition into alternative medicine, which he feels very passionately about. Jonathan, welcome this afternoon. Thank you very much for confirming everything is good. David Jameson, right, that's a real result. David's basically saying, not necessarily business, but I've started a new community radio show focused on improving mental health. I already have a weekly soul music and more. So that's very interesting, David. Well, that's fantastic. I think we all need cheering up, and also anything that we can give back through the communities is really good. So welcome as far as that's concerned. Michael, welcome. Okay, so do keep the conversations going, and yes, interesting about BBC Breakfast News, what seems to come out each day as well. So in terms of Suzy, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Suzy. I've been very fortunate that I've known Suzy for about 5 years now, 4 or 5 years now, Suzy, I think, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, we met each other initially through LinkedIn, I believe. That led to some great conversations taking place with one of your clients who dealt with high net worth individuals. As far as the events industry per se, I think there's very few people out there who's got Suzy's experience, and we'll be discussing that a lot more in just a moment. If I've described this correctly, you've, on one extreme, worked with ultra high net worth individuals worth over £130 million in terms of asset value. Suzy, if that's right, is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
And then also you last thing you'll be sort of known for in a big way, I suppose, is whole success of this show you were involved with at the Excel Centre last year. Is that right? About 10,000 visitors came through from that. But yes, so actually that leads really nicely into the next point, Suzy. Can you just give us a little bit more background about yourself and your areas of specialism? And also we've got some great topics lined up for today as well.
Great. Okay. Yes, absolutely. So I have, for quite a few decades now, been operating in the commercial events world, business world, predominantly, although I have done a little bit in the B2C arena. Essentially conferences, but also trade shows, training courses as well. And yes, from literally across the board, whether it's farmers, teachers, family offices, marketing professionals, telecoms industry, you name it. Most sectors I have been involved with: FMCG, pharmaceuticals. One of our top titles was drug delivery, drug discovery back 20 odd years ago. So a really broad range of industries and sectors, and really bringing those people together predominantly in a physical environment, but have also had experience in the virtual world with regards to webinars, and just, seeing what is happening now with the transitioning of different types of events into the virtual arena, and what looks like it's going to become, to some extent, in many cases, a hybrid offering.
Yeah, that's lovely. So it's a really good introduction, Suzy. Thank you. We're going to really drill down on a lot of this right now. So as a matter of interest, Suzy, just sort of tapping into some of this, if you went back 20 years or so ago, I suppose there was virtually no online events to speak of at all, were there, unless it was being broadcast over some of the digital or analog channels. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, they did start to emerge around about 20 years ago, just 20, 21, 22 years ago. And some of the early examples weren't very good if you were talking about translating the exhibition model. Training sessions, training courses, of course, have adapted incredibly well. And in fact, some are now run online, where you get your own certification, and it's taken sort of people, it's got the content there and they're very effective, but it's taken presenters as such out of the equation. But certainly webinars, even 10, 15 years ago, were a very effective mechanism, particularly for lead generation. And that was, if you've got a platform of, at the time, I think I was working for a global trade association, and they had a platform of members, and it was very focused. And so through a webinar mechanism, they were able to connect the right content with the right people. And it was effective.
Yeah, as a matter of interest, I mean, this is obviously it's a bad time for a pandemic period, and let alone it's probably the worst thing that's happened since I think 1918, I think that was the last pandemic that really, where obviously millions of people lost their lives, as it were, as well as then of course you had the two great wars, as it were. But as a matter of interest, how would the events industry have coped pre virtual streaming the way we've got now? Obviously, there's been a bit of a transition in quite a large way over the last year or so. But what would have happened then? Would there have been anything that people could have done about it particularly?
Not a great deal, no. I mean, I think a lot of providers of meetings are also they've derived, or they have associations with publishing sectors, so they already were there in the sort of written word as such. But no, I think they would have struggled. I mean, there have been times for the events business, back 2001, and then even with the financial difficulties when there have been recessions where. And you will hear some major organizations, even in the technology field, saying, literally they will have travel bans brought in. So as a sector, it has seen hard times, but never anything this bad and that has lasted as long as this. I really don't know, without the technology, how I think more businesses would have completely shut down, would have failed, for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting because actually, if we took Business Growth Bureau as a case in point, yes, we up till sort of February, March last year, probably 70% of what we did was actually physical events that we ran, as well as obviously what we do around LinkedIn and so on. But in reality, we were also running online events for us as prior COVID. So for us, it was a relatively straightforward transition. But, you know, just to think back and how people would have coped with it is quite an amazing thing. So perhaps if we could go to some of the real meat of today, Suzy, if that's okay. Obviously, it's a really relevant topic, this, and it's actually been further reinforced by the announcements at lunchtime by the Bank of England, because what they basically said, I don't know whether everyone's seen the news today, but basically what they've said is that over the next few months that they are expecting to see quite a strong recovery. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of sectors. I'm sure Suzy will give us some really good tips around this, where certain sectors are going to be still quite hit for quite a long time. Obviously, the aviation industry is one. Some types of events are going to be particularly bad hit for a while. And potentially, you know, hotels and so on will be in the doldrums for a little bit. Having said that, they're predicting actually quite a strong recovery, probably starting around April, May time, and the rest of this year is quite a strong recovery, and then leading into next year, they talk about things coming back to pre-COVID levels. So that's actually quite encouraging. So I think when we were talking about on the mini conference a few days ago, that, you know, we believe that actually was going to be a bit of a transition. We shouldn't get caught out by it. We need to be starting to plan now. Today's conversation with Suzy is very, very topical. But Suzy, if we look at the first point here is, what do you see really happening now for the business events market in the UK and beyond? What I'm going to do is remove this slide for a moment so we can just focus on both of us, as it were, and go from there. Just spare me a second while I press a button here because I've lost access to everything. There we go. No, it's not. Sorry about this. There we go. And yeah. So where would you where do you basically see the events market going for both now and both in the UK, but what now in the immediate future, and how do you see things sort of improving over the coming months?
Well, a lot of the major operators have adapted, and they are doing reasonably well. If anything, they're seeing, some of them are seeing their turnover impacted by only something like 20%. A lot of that's mainly the conference players. They have been able to switch online more easily. The exhibition industry is a little different, and of course, a lot of the major trade shows that exist, and this is from a global perspective, but certainly in the UK as well, particularly in the US, they are trade shows that are put on by trade associations. And for a lot of trade associations, they get as much, if not more, revenue from the events they put on than they do from their membership fees. So in some ways, they've got a sort of a stronger position because they have got a membership base and they have got a real purpose to serve that membership base. But without the ability to put on a live face-to-face show and bring that community together, that's going to hit their income streams very hard. So it's varied. So a lot of the conference material, they're meeting online. They're having virtual sessions. The exhibitions, a lot of what's happening, they've done that to some extent. They've adapted their models around that, and some have been hugely successful in doing that, and they have reached a much larger audience base, and they have maintained their certainly, yeah, their income levels, certainly their margins they've maintained, and they've kept a hold in the marketplace, and they're still providing information, which is obviously valuable. A lot of them have deferred, so they've literally lost an entire year. And I'm seeing a lot of shows being scheduled that would have been in the spring of this year into the autumn of next year, and they, so that effectively they missed last spring, they've missed this spring, this summer, they're going into the autumn. And what I'm seeing is a lot of the ones that were reasonably successful making the transition to the virtual world are planning to come back as a hybrid model. So they're still going, so they're going to come back as face-to-face. So they're bringing that back. They've not gone to virtual and they're staying with virtual. They're then going to move to hybrid, where they will do some virtual content and some some face-to-face, which is interesting. So they got through quite successfully with the virtual model, but they're not sticking with that. They are going to go back to face-to-face, interestingly, and all the cost base that brings with it. So it's quite a mixed game. As I say, for a lot of them, I think Financial Times, they said 2019 their delegate base was 15,000. Last year it was 150,000.
Wow.
So their reach has been, exponential. I mean, along with that, they've had to change a lot of what they're offering in terms of the length of the activity and in terms of the pricing model. And of course, the entire cost base has changed. They haven't got venues as such, they haven't got catering, but they have platforms. But I think the point you were making, which was very good, you were already in the online arena. I mean, even to do the big show that we did last February in Excel with 10,000 people, we were having daily Zoom meetings, sometimes with up to 100 contributors to plan that entire process going forward. So we already had the technology, thank goodness. And I think this last statistic I saw was there are 400 event tech companies in existence. So it was there, it was waiting, it had been deployed to some extent, and thank goodness it was there. And as I say, a lot of conferences have transitioned very successfully to the virtual arena. It isn't so easy for the expo companies, although I was listening today to a presentation from, it was a sort of fireside chat like this, on virtual events from the Event Tech Show and how they transitioned to a virtual. And the statistics were really very, very powerful. And as a consequence of that, they are growing. This year they will do 2 shows. So they had one that they ran at the, I think it was the Truman Brewery, that they ran it as a physical event. They ran it as a virtual event last year. This year they're going to run it as a virtual and a sort of hybrid event in the UK again, in London, but they are launching an event for the Canadian US market.
Right. Wow.
So, and the statistics they were talking about, when you drilled it down, they said they were able to get as many participants, funders, the exhibitors coming on board, because they stripped out all of the costs of being there, of traveling to be there, building the stand. So they were there as a virtual event, and so their cost base was very, very low. I think they worked out the figures that they had an audience of 2,700 people, and it cost them 1,400 at the entry point. So work out the statistics on that as a lead gen exercise. It's really quite a successful offering, and as a consequence of that what they're doing, they've learned a lot, and they're still going through a transition phase. They still had to sell the show as though it was a physical entity, because the people who were buying from them were used to buying on that basis, and the people who were attending were used to looking at a floor plan. So they didn't. You get two schools of thoughts coming through here. You will hear people say, well, a virtual event isn't a physical event, so you have to, look at it completely differently. And then you've got people saying, well, hold on a moment, you've still got to transition from one to the other. So don't throw everything away and start completely from scratch. So it's interesting to see the different operators, how they're approaching it. And can get completely bogged down with what technology could or couldn't do. Some interesting points about how is it cutting out the sales channel, because for them to sort of follow up on the lead gen, are they talking to marketers more because they can connect with what the sort of what that the interaction that they're getting, and how do they do the follow-up on that? So some really interesting things happening around that. But yes, some organizations are seizing the opportunity and going for growth as a consequence.
Right.
Some have really suffered.
Yeah, now this is a little bit of a curveball question, so I'm not sure, I certainly wouldn't know what the answer is, you might just. But first of all, of course, what's going to happen with the Olympics this year? Technically, it's still going ahead, isn't it? Do you think that's going to still happen?
well, the Japanese are saying that it has to go ahead. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I think, isn't it the Australian Open is going ahead, but they're going to have 30,000 rather than 60,000 visitors. And it's obviously going to be very sort of hygiene compliant. So, as I say, I think events are adapting. Some will go ahead. I heard today that somebody said they thought Reading Festival was going to go ahead, interestingly. So,
Really?
yes, so it's a real mixed bag, but it has presented a lot of opportunities for people to do more, to instead of having one event where you get everyone to travel, sometimes from quite far away, they're now looking at that community and saying, how can we serve them in a more sort of localized option? So again, I was listening to another session on an original hybrid event, and this was 10 years ago, and it was actually the events industry, so it was an event about events, that put it on, and they talked about how they came up with overseas hubs. So there were contingent of people in Sweden, there was another one in the Netherlands. So the event happened in the UK, it was a live event, but then they streamed it, and then they had these hubs in groups, in venues, in hotels, together in that country, listening and participating as a group. I think they even did a virtual wine tasting, sort of live and virtual, happening at the same time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And also, it's funny, our son yesterday was taking part in an online event or session. It was organised by one of the very large agency chains in London. And technically, from a technological point of view, it was really clever because they created what looks like a real virtual stage. Now, we use another platform called Remo, which actually is quite a good platform, which creates this whole thing around virtual tables. And a number of people who are on the live stream today are familiar with it because they've taken part in it. But this is moving to another level. It was really very three-dimensional. Now, I don't know if it was just the presenters on it who were actually dull as dishwater, or whether it was because they were told they couldn't move very much, because there was the only thing I can, these presenters there, but they almost looked as if they'd been stuffed. It looks like you've got a moving head on top of a body, but the body was just stationary. Now, I don't know whether they were told to stand still as much as possible, but it ended up by doing is coming across as a really boring event, very corporate feel, very boring, very sterile. People forgetting that people engage with real people, and I think somehow I'm a bit of a techno geek, so I love all the technology, but you have to know its place, don't you? And somehow, if you do things online, unfortunately, we need to be a lot more animated, because you almost need to jump out of the screen, so that people feel they actually almost can. I wouldn't say touch and feel you, but they feel you're almost across the desk from them. So
it's a real challenge, and it's going to be such a challenge when they adapt the sort of model to do hybrid, how they're going to serve two separate communities and not take away. I mean, I've been at events years ago where we were streaming the sessions, and then I found it impeded the dialogue in the room, because people didn't want to be recorded asking a question. They represent their organizations, they don't want it to be misconstrued that they're so. Yeah, it can be a good thing, and in other ways it's it can be a barrier to a natural dialogue. So how everyone wants to capture the content and they want to share it, and that's a wonderful thing that we can now to share on a sort of broader base, and we can be more inclusive, we can bring more people in, and that's bringing that sort of price barrier down for entry for attendees is amazing. It's really important to do that. But as I say, it can present some hurdles for sure.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I'd love to come on to the next topic, really, in terms of I think you talk about sort of different business events or different outcomes. Can you give us a few? Obviously, you've been at the extreme ends, haven't you? On one hand, you've been dealing with some very boutique events for ultra high net worth individuals, which include a few billionaires within that mix as well. And there's all sorts of things you've sort of shared with me there. To the other example stream, where you're dealing with the Excels of this world, we've got 10,000 people which you've been involved with. Can you just explain a bit more about the different types of events you get and the different outcomes that you perhaps should be working towards as far as that's concerned?
Yes, I mean it's a case of horses for courses. It really does. It all goes back to who the audience are and why you want to be communicating with them, what's driving that. There are lots of different meetings, and now, thank goodness, because of technology, anyone can convene a meeting and hopefully make it more interactive, make it more possible for more contribution from different parts of the sort of community. But yeah, I think what's happening at the moment is you're seeing some successful transition into the virtual arena, but there are still some who are sort of saying that we still need to have live. I mean, yeah, we've seen so much growth in events. I mean, even with festivals, there are massive festivals, but locally we all now have festivals that happen. So I think, we will continue to see lots of different offerings from people, lots of different formats, and again, it used to be that you would have 7 speakers in a day and it would be monologue followed by monologue. That thankfully has long gone, and events are more interactive now, and I think with sort of Zoom you can segment off people at the flick of a switch, whereas you'd have to sort of persuade people they needed to get up and move when they're in dialogue with already a group of people here. That was harder work to do that in a physical location. So I think there just are so many choices, and I think it's become more. I think you'll see more players coming to the market because it's going to be very cost effective to gather people.
Yes. Now, obviously, as part of the call today, we've got people on this live stream today who, are very heavily involved in sort of medium to larger size businesses, and then we've also got a lot of people online today who perhaps are themselves coaches, trainers, mentors, consultants, so that their needs are very different, and the way they interact is very different to perhaps it would be if you're running a larger business, or perhaps a director with a larger business. Is there plenty of room, do you think, to be much more niche? How can, with what is a very much almost a 2D medium, as it were, make things feel much more intimate from a participant's point of view, so they actually feel part of the real experience? And I suppose related to that, it's really interesting because I was also listening to some other people sharing value online a few days ago. And for example, today, it's commonly known that for every one person that comments, generally, in something like this, which is being streamed out live, there may be 10 other people who are actually behind the scenes listening or taking part in it. And it's not always at the time. For example, today, it's been broadcast at precisely 5:27 GMT today. People might be watching it this evening or tomorrow, and of course they'll see the comments coming up. So you get the delayed effect of all that kicking. So how can you make this much more intimate so people do want to engage?
Well, I think we probably need to stop now and ask some questions and get people involved, because that's how it works in the real world. I mean, the most successful roundtable sessions that we did, again, when we would have effectively billionaires in the room, I would, before we got onto any sessions or presentations as such, I would insist, and it would take 45 minutes, an hour to go round 20 odd people, and to do it justice, to give everyone 2-3 minutes each at least, to say why they're there and what they need to get from it. And the benefit from that is not just that the people who are presenting then understood the requirements of the people in the room, but everyone else understood that, and then they knew how to connect with those people. So it's not just it's right across the board, so that everyone gets value from giving up that time to travel and be there. Who else are they meeting, and where is their common ground, and how can they stay connected with them? And without giving them a voice, it's very hard to do that. I mean, you're very good, Rupert, because you will explain who's here and what their background is. But I think the best thing for us to do now is to ask for some questions.
Yeah, good. So, ladies and gentlemen, all of you who are joining in this afternoon, what would you like out of today? So, I've got the ideal person here giving the prompts. A question from you, Suzy. What should we be asking people today, do you think?
I'm sorry, Rupert.
What question else? Other questions can we ask our guest here to that they may want to pose from us.
So what are they looking forward to, say, in 6 months' time, in terms of, are they looking forward to more opportunities to meet with people in a virtual capacity, and what are they looking to get from that?
Yeah, lovely. So I think Nikki's just replying now, saying, for my online events, which tend to be workshops and group coaching, I take time at the start, setting expectations, inviting interactions, asking questions, and using breakout chats. Yeah, Nikki, that's a great point, actually. Now, we've also got Stuart Honey here, who's a little bit experienced on running events. In fact, he's heavily involved in an events platform. And we've got our friend David as well, which is launching a community radio show. So I think all of you must have got some opinions on this. So I love Lawrence's comment, real ale. Well, the nice thing is, Lawrence, you can drink real ale at home and no one knows you're doing it. So just carry on and enjoying it. Yeah. So, but yeah, no, just tell us, please, guys. You know, we're really interested to hear from you. It's interesting, actually, because also there's a bit of a debate. You know, for example, today we're streaming this live and it's going out through a Facebook page and YouTube and everything else. Now, sometimes you can get it so they're very, very interactive. You get a lot of discussion. Other times people can feel a little bit inhibited as well. So this is also a bit of a discussion about whether you have something as an open event or more closed. And there's drawbacks and benefits with both, aren't there? So, so Stuart's saying he's going to come back with something in just a minute. So yeah, keep those coming. Okay. And Nikki, I'll come back to you in just a moment. So if you drop a few questions in or any feedback, what you'd like out of running or online events or versus physical, any top tips, we'd love to hear those as well. So Suzy, coming back to you, we'll come back to our guests in just a moment. What would you say are the key drivers? That you talked about the who, the why, and explained why the why needs to drive the how. Can you just explain a bit more about what you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is always keeping in mind why you're taking up somebody's time. You know, are they learning something? Are they meeting someone? Why do they need to meet that person? What are the alternatives that they've got? So I think really going back to the essence of why you're bringing people together. I mean, in the conference world, it was always driven by the topic. It was always, you know, a need to know this is coming on the horizon. It was new methodologies, new regulations, new technology. Suddenly, oh gosh, I'm going to be found wanting. I'm not representing my company. I'm not doing my job properly. I'm not keeping on top of things. I will go to an event. And the majority of people who would go, that would be like-minded people, they would go and they would get the reassurance that everyone else was pretty much in the same boat, but hopefully they would take away some real pointers. And I've certainly had people stand up and say, because we would encourage the presenters to, you know, talk about the opportunities, but also talk about the pitfalls. You know, I think at one point I was almost looking at different sectors, and there were some sectors who weren't meeting and they weren't sharing this information, and they were the sectors that generally had really low margins because they were all making the same mistakes. You know, they weren't learning the lessons and actually improving. So bringing people together to really learn what not to do as well as what to do and how to go forward. And just connecting people so that they felt empowered and you know, really inspired to go out there and affect the change, move forward, make progress. So I think you have to just bear in mind who you're bringing together, why you're bringing them together, what is it that they need to get from it, and just keep that uppermost. The format of how you deliver that sort of should be built around that rather than the other way around. Oh, we're going to do a virtual event and we're going to use all of these you know, gizmos and tools and what have you. Why? They can be an encumbrance sometimes if they're not, you know, sort of serving the purpose of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, no, lovely. Yeah, that's really interesting. And just going back a little bit, when you were dealing with or working with delegates who were ultra high net worth individuals, they obviously, there was lots of sensitivities there in terms of discretion. People themselves wanted to keep themselves being quite private. Presumably, one of the big challenges you had each time was always trying to find a way of making their experience totally amazing. What tips would you have about making events totally amazing. So people really want to come, especially where you've got people who are not perhaps already making a lot of money, but very, very time poor, very time challenged. How do you make them feel they want to be really involved and also make it something really special?
Well, in that instance, I mean, it's not dissimilar to other cases. In fact, unlike the quote about the Scott Fitzgerald quote about rich people, they're very similar to the rest of us. And what we would do was be sure from the get-go, from even before they arrived, they knew that there would be like-minded people, like people from the same background in the audience, and that predominantly they would be meeting their peers. And for them, that was incredibly powerful. I mean, it was almost emotional. I think there was one case in Hong Kong where we'd put together just the families in a room, and they the next day they didn't want to have, they had a really quick lunch so they could go to reconvene again, because to be able to sit down with other families that had the same challenges that they had in terms of preserving their wealth and the succession planning within the family business, and just what they do with the next gen is very sensitive area. But for them, what was most powerful was the other people they met who were their peers, essentially, and they had the same issues, sometimes slight tweaks on it, but not dissimilar. And so what we would do is we would make a point of introducing them and creating an environment where they felt, really very safe. I mean, we brought in, and there were outsiders as well. We would bring in, thought leaders. We would bring in people even on the supply side if they had investment opportunities, but it was still very careful how we managed that and how we affected the introductions, and just generally the environment we created for them, so that they felt very safe and comfortable with being able to sort of divulge who they were. And but there was a massive sea change even in more recent years. They would talk about, I mean, we had a chairman who talked about how his wife had battled alcoholism. They'd had a sect taking off one of the daughters at one point, and he shared all of this from the platform. And by doing that, it broke down the barriers, and then everyone in the room felt comfortable with sharing their problems. So it was amazingly powerful stuff. I mean, I think it's the only time I've run, bar one time I've nearly cried on 2 occasions, when someone's sitting on the platform saying, the last time she spoke to her stepbrother was at her father's funeral and what have you. It's just really powerful stuff, how money and businesses can actually separate families. In most cases, they were solid, but then everyone else wanted to know, what's the magic formula for that? How do you do that? And it was, built around, really strict governance rules sometimes, but they were a fascinating community, but very caring, very passionate about philanthropy, and really doing some very smart things in terms of where the future is going and the investment on the healthcare side. And I mean, they love their real estate play as well, but a very interesting set of people. But they're people, and they, as I say, they want to connect with peers. And I think it's the same when you put a group of teachers into a room, as I've done. Their concerns are all the same. They're talking to a chief examiner. They want to understand, how are you marking these papers? They want to go back. They want to do their job. They want to live their lives, do their work to the best of their ability. And so they're there like sponges, soaking up as much knowledge as they can get.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. In fact, as a company, we must get in touch with them again, because they're good friends, but also they're clients as well, and they specialize in events, but very boutique events, although very big. So it's all to do with the pharmaceutical industry, and there's predominantly scientists and professors and all these other fantastic people who've, of course, now like gold dust, because they helped create the vaccines that we're all benefiting from. But it's very much explained for them. It's about, by the company involved, it's about creating experience for those people. And also, as you say, because scientists also like to mix with other scientists or other people which they can connect and engage with. And also, to be frank, they were also saying you tend to find who meet potential new challenges or new business opportunities, or get new job offers coming on the back of some of these exciting things as well. So I want to come into the next couple of questions in just a second. And obviously, let me just try to slightly change the screen here. Give me a second. So we'll do that. Nikki's given a little bit of, so David's just come back on this. And in particular, Nikki's made this great point about getting engagement and turning up live, etc. It's quite a long comment, Nikki, so it's quite difficult for me to read on the screen. But you particularly talk about what was interesting, seeing clients change their mindset from believing we had to meet in person to seeing fantastic results continue despite meetings being online, which is a really interesting one. And Stuart, honey, you're heavily involved in the US as well, aren't you? So, and much of the UK relies on hospitality and entertainment. And as with massive corporate events in the UK, right, fantastic, with weekends and so on. And how should venues, destinations set about in convincing people now used to cheap online events that it's going to be worth coming to meet face to face again once the world starts to open up? In fact, that's a really good point, actually, because people perhaps expect to pay less too, don't they? So any thoughts on that particular one?
Well, I think there's also an issue around everyone's more concerned with sustainability now. Certainly the major show I did in Excel, the numbers that we were having to collect data on were phenomenal in terms of justifying that we were, keeping our carbon footprint as low as possible. So there is concern now on that issue, irrespective of COVID. So, I do think that there will be opportunities, as I say. I think there will be hubs. I think that there will be people who will be meeting. But I think one of the other things that will happen, that we'll see, is that people will plan better. And this is something I've seen for many years. You will have someone who will come from the US, and they will come to a show on the continent or the UK, and they will plan their European holiday around that. So therefore, they're getting more efficiency from that ticket, the Atlantic, transatlantic part of it, at least. They will sort of think of it not just as a separate, I'm going to fly in and fly out. I think, that will drive behavior. So I think, the marketing of what are the benefits of the face-to-face, I think we'd already started to see in the commercial conference world sort of add-ons that were going on. We were building some events that would start off as a regular 2-day conference. There were optional workshops that you could add on pre-post. There were separate dinners that were going on. There were awards that were attached. So there were a lot of extra components that were added on that sort of gave people more, so they weren't just there to learn, they were there to network, or they were there to celebrate. There were more reasons for them being there. But I think it will be a challenge for the venues, for sure. But I think there are some opportunities there, and I think hopefully it will take some of the uncertainty out of attendees and the business that happens there, because people will plan better, because they will need to, because they will just have to create better efficiencies around that traveling. And I think that there will be more competition. There will be good virtual meetings taking place. There will be other opportunities to gain knowledge, to get the information, and to meet with people.
Well, if it's all right with you, I'm going to return to that in just two, actually, because I want to obviously touch a bit more on the future of hybrids, and also winners and losers in this current situation, and what opportunities there actually are. Jonathan's asked a really good question. Now, this is probably a little bit off topic, so if you're not 100% sure of this, don't feel this as a curveball heading your way. But Jonathan is asking the question is, what does Suzy think about the use of offices? How will that change in the future?
Yeah, I think it will change quite dramatically. I think people will use offices to have meetings. I think Google said that they're going to expect people to work a 2 or 3 day week in the future. So I think there will still be offices, but I think the whole working world will change. People will be based from home. Certainly I would sit around here on a Friday. The traffic was always much easier. And that's simply because a lot of companies, big major companies, had a work from home Friday. you know, personally, I think it would be better if it was sort of evened out. So I think it will. I think there will still be offices, but the way offices exist for people to go in 9 till 5, 5 days a week, I think that's all going to change. And therefore, I think when people are at home, it will create a different environment in terms of how they interact with information and networking to some extent. I mean, we're all sitting in our homes now, and that gives us perhaps more of a, I don't know, more of a comfort zone than if we were out at a live meeting. I don't know. I think it will be interesting, because I think you'll get participation from people who wouldn't have gone to a live meeting, who, because they're in their home, may actually feel more inspired to sort of opt in and listen and can contribute in some way than they may have done if it had been a sort of face-to-face meeting.
Yeah, it's really interesting also, this whole area of sales as well, isn't it? Because there was a perception that you always had to go and see, especially for high ticket sales, where you had to always go and see a potential client to be able to, I don't really like the expression, but touch the flesh, almost shake hands and this type of stuff, to be able to do some serious pieces of business. And it's really interesting because actually it's led to a completely new way of interacting with clients and doing business. And certainly for high ticket sales, we've certainly found as well that actually virtual private meetings can work very well too. I know it's a bit off topic, but it's a really interesting subject.
I think it is. I think for building relationships and for maintaining relationships, it's so convenient that you can just sort of switch, link onto a link, and then two of you are having a dialogue and you can see each other face to face, but from the comfort of your home. I absolutely agree with you. I think it offers so many opportunities for individuals in their roles to stay connected with people.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. So lovely. Well, perhaps come back to one or two of those just a minute. And Renato, thank you very much for your comments as well about other countries and also Italy as well. It's really interesting. So I think we've already touched a little bit about gone a little bit more into detail around the hybrid event. So if I've understood you correctly, you're really saying that you see the future largely being hybrid. Is that what you're saying?
That's what seems to be being said, that it will go hybrid, so they won't lose all of the sort of virtual elements. And as I say, I think it offers opportunities for growth, that they can do both. But I think, again, it's easy to say, oh, we'll do hybrid. Easier said than done. It's going to be a challenge in terms of how they how that works going forwards. I'm not so sure it's as simple as just saying we'll adopt the hybrid. I think it's going to make people sort of think really hard about who their community are, who they're trying to serve, and how they're doing that.
Yeah, they're lovely. Thank you. Karen's asked a really good question, actually. Karen's one I know very well, but it's a really good question. Karen, I'm going to save that for about 7 or 8 minutes. I'm going to come back to Suzy on that particular one. And I think we've also talked a little bit about winners and losers and opportunities for you. But where would you say, Karen, I'm going to save yours, I love it. Just where would you say some great opportunities are likely to come from over the next 6 or 12 months?
I think from two places. Those organisations that have sort of grasped the nettle with virtual events, they will continue to grow, and I think there will be some opportunities in other markets on the virtual side of things for them. And I think that obviously the tech platforms, there are a lot of opportunities. It'll be interesting to see. It used to be that some of the major venues on the continent, that they would then start their own sort of exhibition companies, offering their own exhibitions in their own halls, so that they had actual custom at sort of quieter times. So it's going to be interesting to see whether any of the tech platforms actually get involved in on the content side of things. I mean, I think it's the democratization of content. I mean, it's just going to be interesting. It's a little bit like Netflix. I mean, there's different ways of getting content, but you still need good content, don't you? I mean, if there's nothing to watch on there, there's no way that anyone's going to sort of sign up for a subscription. So I think there are lots of opportunities for people who can harness and package that content. And it's probably in a slightly different format, but the conference world has been rife with entrepreneurialism for decades. So I think that we'll see lots of things coming out of that, which will be
and
interesting.
we're very much an entrepreneurial economy as well. It's one of the great benefits with being in the UK, isn't it, as well? So, and so Karen, just hang in there. We're going to come to your question in a minute. I'm going to just do a little bit of a lead into next week as well, and then come back in just a second. So there we go. So next week, basically, we literally changed the heading of next week's session on the fly today, immediately following the 1 o'clock news that occurred as part of this. And I've been saying this actually a bit last week, particularly on the mini conference that occurred on Tuesday this week, that we did see that over the next few months that there would be a bit of a bounce back. Now, obviously, there are a few sectors we know, as Suzy we discussed today, which could be impacted for a bit longer. And in fact, also Roger Musk, and he is involved with Celtic Castles, and that sector has been very badly hit and will be for a little while. Having said that, there's also very unusual things sort of going on in the marketplace, which no doubt be discussed. But what I touched on Tuesday was very much this whole thing about, in real terms, we need to get ready for what's to come. So there are many sectors that, as things start to open up, probably around about April time, possibly May, which are going to probably come back much stronger than people actually believe. I think we got so used to being in this perhaps semi-depressed state or very depressed state that we're in at the moment, that it's very difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So, and the Bank of England themselves have said today that they are expecting things to make a fairly quick recovery, I think from the late spring, early summer this year and into the end of this year. And next year, and particularly, the Bank of England is saying that it could well reach pre-COVID levels. So I've repeatedly said before, and I would just reinforce this, is the trick with this is actually to make sure that you're riding on the wave, or ideally the crest of the wave as things start to return. So if you're holding back at the moment, think I'll actually go into my shell, be focusing on a lot more in the way of development or content, wherever it may be, this is an ideal time to be speaking to your prospects and customers. So the first point there is obviously, are we being delusional? Are we being, as entrepreneurs, perhaps too optimistic? And what we should be preparing for and what is likely to come, and looking at the state of your business and business readiness, and what you can put in place, not be left behind, and crucially, making sure, we'll be discussing this quite a bit, about what you should be doing with your prospects and customers. So if you haven't really shown much attention to your prospects, for example, in the last year or so, because you've got the mindset they're not going to be spending money, well, people will very quickly forget you. So this really is a time to be reaching out to your prospects, not with a view necessarily to sell, because they may not be ready just yet. But what I will say to you is if you're forefront of mind, showing you care and you're interested in that relationship, stand you in good stead. So next week's session is going to be a bit more of a real session, an interactive session, where we're going to be encouraging lots of debates amongst everyone who's taking part, who is attending. But also, we're working on getting another guest involved who will also be a panelist. So there should be lots of lively discussion around all of this. Anyway, so moving on a little bit from that, obviously we are very interested in working with people. Obviously, the fact that Suzy has very kindly given her time today to share value, which I'm sure we're very appreciative of. Hopefully you've got a bit of real sense that you're amongst a really caring community of people who are on the lookout for each other. And ultimately, running a business, say every week, is a very lonely place, or it can be, unless you've got a very good support network around you. And that applies if you're a company of one or you're a company of 1,000. Because it's just the needs are different. So what I would say is, if you're enjoying these sessions, do set a reminder in Facebook, register for multiple weeks, like many of you have done today. If you're happy, like the page and share it with your network. We'd really appreciate that, because Facebook and YouTube, etc., reward us for that, which of course means it helps us to grow what we're doing, give back to you. The session next week is actually a double session. We moved to one session for every other week, but the second Thursday of every month is a double session. And what we're doing is doing a little bit something a bit different next week. We're actually inviting people who join us at 3:45 to take part in basically a focus group. So it'll be a bit of a different format. What we're wanting to do is to go out to our existing customers, but also our regulars on Thursdays as part of the focus group to ask what they really like from us moving forwards. And also we want to be able to test a little bit out on some of our new things coming forward and just get some feedback. And there will be a couple of small prizes there as a little bit of a thank you, because actually it's just we're asking for a bit of help from you guys in terms of what happens next. And obviously we've already talked about what's going to be in the 5 o'clock session next week. Next mini conference will be on the 2nd of March. It probably will be a bit of a different format, okay? And there's a few things we're working on behind the scenes. So we'll announce that a bit closer to the time, but you can pre-register now from our website. And the way that you, as you know, we're very interested in helping you to bring sales forward, get your time back and leverage technology to get results. This is what we will be covering as part of that, but we're going to look at some other interesting areas around this as well. So get in early if you can and pre-register. And the way you can access all these things is from these different links on this. If you go to the homepage of the website, it pretty well takes you there. So if you want to take part in the mini conference, you can do it from the homepage, the on-demand webinar, the live stream sessions. Also, if you want to plug into it, there's the option to take part in a sales and marketing health check diagnostic. It takes 4.5 to 6 minutes to complete, and you get some really meaningful information back. And obviously, you're welcome to book a call in with me and Muriel as part of that, and we can discuss in detail what you get out of it. So I won't come to the slide just, in fact, let's move to this slide because we've got the contact details, but I do want to go in and ask Suzy this question as well. And obviously, if any else of you have asked a couple of questions, then we'll try and drop these in the last minute or so, a few minutes of today. But if you had wanted to reach out to Suzy, Suzy's details, LinkedIn details are there. I don't think at the moment, Suzy, you've got a website, have you?
No.
So best to reach out on Suzy on LinkedIn. In fact, some of the best people we work with actually still don't have a website today, interesting enough, but it works very well what we do with them. Suzy's mobile is there on the screen as well, so do reach out, and also Suzy's email address. And Suzy is a real expert. If I was running large-scale events or we're running very boutique events, I'd have no hesitation in recommending Suzy. So please do reach out. She's a very caring person as well, and very professional as well, as I think hopefully has come across today. So let me just move this a second so we can, and Muriel, if you want to join us at this point as well, please do. So let me just, there we go, Muriel's back, just like magic as we speak. So going to Karen's question, also let's look at a few other points that people are making. Yeah, so basically, this is a really interesting topic because, and this is very common with webinars especially, is I think a lot of people would sign up for a webinar or a virtual event, and what they'll do is they'll have several tabs open in Chrome or Firefox or whatever, and on one hand they'll be listening to what's going on the other hand they're trying to multitask. So you tend to find that perhaps you haven't always got people's attention. And it's interesting with the mini conference, we ran 2 or 3 days ago. That was a 3.5-hour event, and Suzy, you very kindly contributed to that as well. It is quite a big ask to ask someone to sit through for a few hours. Interesting enough, there's a master at this who's really good. In fact, probably some of you online know him. It's a guy called Nigel Botterill, who's a bit of a professional marketeer, to put it politely. But somehow he manages to pull off events which run for 2 days. He treats them like an event. He has like a 15-minute break after an hour and a half, then a lunch break for an hour, then another 15-minute break in the middle of the afternoon. And he gets some really good audiences with what he's doing. So you can actually make online events really, really successful. But what are there some tips that you would give about trying to really capture people's imagination and make it so interesting, exciting for them, so they don't want to keep on flipping away to going to deal with their email and do all these other things. How can we make it much more dynamic and much more exciting?
Well, I think the challenge existed face to face. I've had plenty of meetings, conferences, events where people are, particularly with the advent of the mobile phone, distracted by what's going on at the office, other sort of demands on their time. So I think that's always been an issue, whether it's virtual. I just think it's whether you're matching up the relevant content. I do think that seeing the questions that are being asked that's very relevant. And certainly with, I think it was the Adobe platform that I've used in the past, where you would have more than one presenter. And so the person could be talking to another presenter about what their specific requirements were. I mean, you couldn't do that in a live face-to-face. That would be deemed as being rude. You would be talking over the presenter. But if you had a, absolute requirement to know a little bit more about something, you could actually, use that platform, that mechanism to sort of drive that answer. But again, it's taking your attention away from the person who's presenting. So I think it's just a question of having a really clear proposition of what it is you're going to say and making sure it's relevant to that person, and really imploring from the get-go that if you try to do too many things at once, and I've been guilty of that in the past, you end up not focusing and you don't do any of them at all well. So you've really got to try. You're right, absolutely, Rupert, in terms of the amount of time that you how you segment time, the format that you use, whether you get people involved, whether they can see the questions that their peers are asking at the same time. All of that, I think, creates more interest and sort of keeps people involved more.
Yeah,
the challenge, whether it's face to face or whether it's online. I mean, it's one of those perennials, I think.
Yeah, lovely. In fact, it's really interesting actually, because a lot of people are making some really good good points here. Yes, Zoom zombies for being the presenter. I really I love some of these comments which are coming through. And then Mark Stewart saying he's guilty as charged. Okay, and yeah, Renato is probably one of these amazing people who is gifted. He can multitask and do everything all at the same time. And very unusual for us men, I have to say. Women are normally much more blessed in that direction. I think some really good points come out here. And actually, I think you guys actually, as part of the audience today, have shown me up a little bit, because it's when Suzy made the point we should be asking the audience a little bit more what they thought. And of course, we've noticed all these activities coming through. So a very big thank you to you as participants today. And Suzy, a very big thank you to you for your very kind contribution. Muriel, any sort of closing thoughts or anything you would particularly like to ask Suzy before we let her go, as it were?
No, absolutely nothing. But just thank you for sharing a wealth of information. Really, really, really great.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much. And that's absolutely brilliant. So Suzy, stay with us for a minute or two. We'd like to have a chat in the green room, as it were. But thank you very much for taking part. Do join us next Thursday. It is a double session. And the first session will be run as a focus group. Second session going to be very interactive. If I can get this other person along, he's good at throwing a few hand grenades. So it should be quite good fun. I think Muriel knows who I'm talking about as well. Anyway, you take care, everyone. We'll see you next week. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, take care. Suzy, stay with us. Thank you.